everybody. Okay. We officially go by the clock on the back wall, and I'm going to say that it's 7:30. I'll have to admit the council is a little bit off balance tonight because we're not usually up here with having any kind of leisure at all before the meeting starts. It's usually we arrive up here about 30 seconds before it's time to start. But I do want to welcome everyone on behalf of the Abingdon Town Council here for our November 2012 meeting. A couple of things that I will point out to you. First of all, Council receives a package of materials to help us prepare for each of the meetings that we have. A copy of those documents is on the table there to my left. If there's anyone that wishes to review those documents, you're welcome to have a look at it and review the materials that is made available to us. During the course of this meeting tonight, there will be several opportunities to address the town council. We have a couple of public hearings that will be coming up a little bit later in the meeting, and at that time the public will have an opportunity to address council regarding those specific topics that are being presented. And later on in the course of the meeting, there will be an area or a time when items that are not on our agenda, when those who are present who might have some issue they wish to bring before us will have that opportunity. I did remember to turn off my cell phones tonight. I would encourage everyone, I would ask, please, if you have a cell phone with you this evening, that you do turn it off at the present time. That being said, I will ask our clerk, Ms. Rosenbaum, if she will call the roll, please.
Mr. Howard.
Here.
Mr. Humphries.
Here.
Mr. Berry.
Here.
Mrs. Lowe.
Here.
Mayor Morgan.
Here.
And let the record reflect that all 5 council members are present.
Okay. We have a special guest with us this evening, Mr. Logan Dye, who is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll ask if you'll come forward at the present time.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let's see, we have several employee acknowledgments this evening, and I will turn that over to our town manager, Mr. Greg Kelly.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you. It's always nice to be able to recognize the staff that do the hard day-to-day work each day of the year, and we're fortunate that we have 5 individuals to recognize tonight. However, several of them were unable to be here tonight, but I am going to call their name, and those who are here, if you will come forward at the time that I call your name, I have a nice plaque for you, as well as a pin that represents the years of service. The first is Todd Neal, who is an operator with the Wolf Creek Water Reclamation Facility, and Todd has been with the town of Abingdon now for 5 years and does an excellent job at the wastewater facility. Next is Tammy Montgomery, who is in the finance department. She's a cashier. She has now been here for 5 years of service. Third, and someone who I know is here, is our town attorney, Deborah Eisenhower, who has now been with the town in that capacity for 5 years. So, Deb, if you will come up, I'll be down in just a second.
You want me to climb on top of it?
Yeah. Third is one of our police officers, Chris Jennings, who is a patrol officer. Chief Sullivan had indicated that neither one of the officers were going to be available to be in attendance tonight. Chris has been with the town for a period of 15 years. And last but not least is John Wolf, who is a sergeant for the police department, and it's not often that you get up into these kind of years, and I wish John could have been present here tonight, but John has now been with the town of Abingdon for 25 years. So please join with me in giving all 5 of these individuals, including the one who is present, a great big round of applause. We'll come down and give Deb her 5-year service award. And I know she knows all about jewelry and pins, so she'll find a place for that 5-year pin. So congratulations.
You know, and you're usually the one taking these photographs, so for a change, we'll let these other folks take care of that. Everybody,
You ready on 3? 1, 2, 3.
thank you. We certainly appreciate the service of all the folks that we certainly appreciate the service of all of the employees that we've recognized tonight, as well as all of our town staff. But I do wish to take this opportunity to thank Ms. Eisenhower and her associate, Mr. Jim Smith, in the back for basically completing an arduous project over in the Country Club Estates thing. We haven't broken ground yet. But it's been one of these processes that has involved a long series of negotiations and efforts and so forth to bring about a very good solution to a complex problem. And we certainly recognize your hard work on that. Both of you have worked long and hard to solve this problem, and we do want to thank you specifically for the work you've done there, as well as many other areas. And thanks to both of you. All righty. We have another presentation this evening. Mr. Logan Dye was here up front just a minute ago, and I think Mr. Garrett Jackson would like to recognize some of the volunteer work that he has done in the muster grounds.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, as you all are aware, we've used Eagle Scouts. That's a bad way of saying it. We utilize Eagle Scout projects throughout town on many different properties that the town owns, the Coon Center, even the Creeper Trail, and now this is the second project we've had on the Muster Grounds property. But Mr. Logan Dye is here this evening, and I'm going to let Leanne explain what his project was.
And could we have him come forward while you do that too, please?
Good evening.
Good evening.
As you all know, the Muster Grounds is the northern trailhead of the Over Mountain Victory National Historic Trail, which is the 330-mile route the Over Mountain men took in 1780 to fight the Battle of Kings Mountain, which was a battle that turned the tide of success of the Revolution. Thousands of visitors visit the Muster Ground each year, and seeking the story of the Over Mountain men and their success in the Revolution. But there's also an element of visitors who come that I found that stumbled upon us quite by surprise. So often they were students or professors at the Virginia Highland Community College or residents who used the trail on a regular basis and had no idea they were walking in the footsteps of these patriots. And we realized there was a real need for signs along the trails, both to help direct the visitors that visit to come to the Muster Grounds to our picnic shelter or picnic area, as well as to the Stone Mill ruins along our trail. And also signs that act as an invitation to people who are on the trail and don't realize that the Muster Grounds and the Visitor Center is at the other end. And Logan Dye met this need for us. With hard work and wonderful craftsmanship, he constructed these directional signs, letting people know what we have to see along the trail, as well as marking each quarter of a mile of trail. Not only did he place those along there, he also even built a few extra signs in hopes that if we're able to extend our trail, our section of trail, that we'll have more markers in the future. And Logan, thank you so much for your service.
You're here.
The certificates from the town of Abingdon, Virginia, presents this certificate of appreciation to Mr. Logan Dye in honor and recognition of his outstanding contributions to the stewardship of the Abingdon section of the Over Mountain Victory National Historic Trail through the efforts of his Eagle Scout project, this 5th day of November, 2012.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't be too shy. Now, let's, very good, sir.
Sorry, Mom.
Yeah, you're about to get me up here.
Very good. And Logan is. The official count of Abingdon lapel pin?
No, they have not.
Oh, they're highly coveted. Thank you very much. And we appreciate the work that you have done, as well as other scouts that have contributed to the muster grounds. Both Mr. Barry and I are Eagle Scouts, and we certainly appreciate all that you have done, and thank you very much. All righty.
Erica, if you'll just write down your email address, I took some pictures while Leanne was making the presentation. I'll email them for you.
Okay. All right, very good. We have a special presentation this evening. Mr. Eric Blevins, who is the Washington County Substance Abuse Prevention, who is with the Washington County Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, and he wants to talk with us about the findings from the community assessment relating to vehicle crashes among 15 to 24-year-olds that involved alcohol. And Mr. Blevins, would you come forward?
Thank you all for having me. As you said, my name is Eric Blevins. I'm representing the Washington County Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition. The Washington County Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition was established in 2009 to actively engage key sectors of the community in addressing substance abuse and use issues in Washington County. In February 2012, Washington County received a state incentive grant to reduce the rate of alcohol-related motor vehicle crashes among youth and young adults between the ages of 15 and 24. 13 counties across the state are participating in this research project. Step one is to conduct a community needs and resources assessment, which has included surveys, focus groups, and finally community forums. This community forum is the final aspect of our data collection. The data collected thus far has revealed there were 38 alcohol-related car crashes in Washington County among youth and young adults ages 15 to 24 during 2009 to 2010. Most of the crashes were males between the ages of 21 and 24. Our community perception and young adult 18 to 24-year-old survey has shown us that 80% of the community respondents perceive that alcohol is easy or very easy to obtain. 60% of young adults perceive driving after one or two drinks as a moderate to high risk. 60% of young adults perceive alcohol as easy to get, even underage. 70% of adults perceive that it is somewhat to very likely to be served alcohol at a bar or at a store, even if drunken. Our focus groups have shown that 18 to 20-year-old young adults reported alcohol as easy to get, usually from older friends or family members. 21 to 24-year-old young adults reported that it's hard to find a true designated driver. For instance, the person who has drank the least amount is usually the driver. 18 to 24-year-old young adults reported that though parents and community disapproved, there is no fear of getting caught or cops might not charge them if they were stopped. We're holding the meeting to explore with you what you think are the primary causes of these alcohol-related crashes among young adults in Washington County. And over time, the project will be working on ways to reduce these crashes. In order to do that effectively, we need your help to understand why this county has such a problem with alcohol-related car crashes in this particular age group. That concludes the presentation. I would like to invite anyone, everyone here to a community forum that's being held in the first floor meeting room and I would be happy to answer any questions or receive any comments that y'all would like to give as well.
And I would note that the hearing or the forum that you're describing is going to start, is it?
7:45, yeah, basically currently.
Okay,
And we will
so-
be waiting.
In about 30 seconds. It'll be
Yeah,
starting
yeah,
there.
we
Okay.
timed it pretty well, I guess.
All right.
But we'd encourage anybody that would like to participate in some questions we have to sort of find out a little more about the perception of the community about this issue.
Okay. And your group started in 2009, was that correct?
The coalition was
Yes.
formed in 2009, and part of that was our effort to receive the grant from the state. In order to receive that grant, we had to put together a coalition of community members. It's a community-driven coalition rather than state-driven, or it's facilitated through Highlands Community Services, but a number of different people in the community have helped us a lot with this.
You've talked a little bit about the number of alcohol-related accidents that we have here in our community. Do we know how that compares with other communities, or?
Well, sort of. The particular set of data that says that we had 38 alcohol-related car crashes, I believe we got that from Virginia Commonwealth University. And one thing we found is that there's not, a whole lot of data at our disposal. So that's one of the things that we're doing is trying to collect whatever we can. And as obviously, compared to somewhere like Fairfax, for instance, it's way less in numbers, but percentage-wise, it was one of the higher counties.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason as well that we were able to receive the grant.
Very good, sir. Council, do you have questions of Mr. Blevins?
No, I would be interested in your results.
We'd be happy to
Okay.
present those when we do continue with our research and try to make some decisions about how to address this issue.
Well, thank you for your efforts on behalf of the community. I'm afraid we won't be able to slip down there and be part of tonight's
I understand
meeting.
completely, yeah.
Keep, as Vice Mayor Lowe indicated, please keep us informed of your results, and thank you very much for your efforts.
Okay, thank you.
All righty, very good. Council, we have 3 sets of minutes for our consideration. The October 1st, 2012 work session meeting, the regular meeting minutes of that same date, and then the minutes of the October 17th, 2012 work session. Are there any corrections or additions that need to be noted for any of these 3 sets of minutes? Hearing none, what is your pleasure in this matter?
I'll make a motion to approve all 3 sets of minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve all 3 sets of minutes as presented. I'll ask our clerk to call the roll, please.
Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Humphries?
Aye.
Mr. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mayor Morgan?
Aye. Okay. We have 2 public hearings this evening. The first public hearing that we have is for an action that we would consider on the first reading, and that is to receive comments from the public regarding the proposed purchase of property, tax map number 010-1-4, legal description of lot 16 of the C.J. Brown Estate, 0.9 of an acre. This is on tax map number 0101-4, currently owned by Associated Tree Services Incorporated. And this notice was given pursuant to the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended. Now, Ms. Eisenhower, I hope you will come forward and reveal to the public what this is all about and the implications of it all.
Yes, the successful outcome of the public hearing is one of the requirements under the code section that you mentioned, Mr. Mayor and Honorable Council. And this public hearing relates to the Associated Tree property which the town intends or would like to acquire, located at 460 Russell Road.
And could you spell out a more generalized location of, or a point of reference of where that is, please?
It is the building and the nearly 1 acre which is adjacent to our Little League sports complex fields on Russell Road.
Okay. All righty, and we are considering buying that property?
We are.
And what is the proposed purchase price, please?
$217,500.
Okay. And I would ask, what is the proposed use of that property?
It would be used basically for parking,
Okay.
to accommodate parents, the parking need that seems to be overly abundant for a long time at the Little League fields.
All right, so it would provide parking for the Little League fields where it's been a crisis there under certain
Exactly.
circumstances over the years.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we understand what the issue is. That being said, I will, at this time, call the public hearing to order and
Yes.
seek any input from the public at the present time, and then
Okay.
we're likely to come back to you here in just a minute. All right, again, I have called the public hearing to order. We have described that the town council is considering the purchase of the associated tree services property across from the Little League fields to essentially be used for parking for that purpose for future years. And I would ask if there was anyone here tonight who wishes to address the public at this time about this matter. If so, you're welcome to come forward at this time. There does not appear to be anyone who wishes to address the public at the present time about this matter. I will therefore declare the public hearing to be closed. And council, do you have questions of Ms. Eisenhower or Mr. Kelly?
I think
Other staff
one
about this?
comment you may want to make is the intent is to tear the building down, which I think
Yes.
will allow, 90 spaces, I think is what,
I think,
somewhere in that range, 80 to 90 spaces.
I think very close to that number, if not a few more.
And I think it would also behoove us to ask how we propose to pay for this property.
I will defer.
can address that better, Mr. Mayor, and we have certain funding in our LGIP fund in Richmond, which was a result of insurance settlement for the Creek Trail trestle, which exceeds the amount that is going to be necessary for the trestle reconstruction. And in addition, Washington County, Virginia had given to the town of Abingdon a sum of $600,000 over payment of a couple, 2 or 3 year period of time. And a portion of that would be applied to it. But that funding is sitting in with the LGIP in Richmond at the present time. So
And the LGIP being the local government investment pool. But again, where I was attempting to lead the witness to get to the point that Washington County Board of Supervisors is contributing in this effort.
that is correct.
Okay. All right. Are there other questions, council, of either of these folks, or do you all have any additional comments you care to make about it? Either Ms. Eisenhower or Mr. Kelly?
It would be the recommendation of the legal department to authorize the town manager to proceed with this purchase.
Were there any issues? I know that we did a preliminary environmental assessment. I think that property served as a garage once upon a time. Was there anything discovered in the course of that assessment?
Yes, there was. It was discovered that underground tanks were in existence at the property many years ago, and they were removed in compliance with EPA and DEQ requirements successfully. The study further revealed that there's an internal drain in the building that drained to an old septic system, and there was also a pump island that was removed at some point in time. So the study recommended that we do a phase 2 study to follow up on those 3 particular issues, which we've already ordered. I would point out that our contract is subject to those being favorable to the town, and in the event that we discovered that there was significant financial remediation, it would give us the ability to get out of the contract, or the landowner would be responsible for those remedial costs. We expect to have that Phase 2 report back within the next 2 to 3 weeks and hope to close on the property, assuming there are no significant environmental issues revealed within a short period after that.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Council, what's your pleasure in this matter?
Mr. Mayor, I move we authorize the town manager to close the property transaction when the terms meet with his satisfaction after the final results of the environmental study comes in.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second, which I don't think I could actually recite that again, but basically it would authorize our town manager to move forward with a contract based on his understanding or his review of the Stage 2 environmental study, and if that was appropriately positive, he would then exercise the contract to move forward with that. Very good. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Okay. I'll ask our clerk to call the roll, please.
Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Humphries?
Aye.
Mr. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mayor Morgan?
Aye. And I would ask Mr. Kelly, do you or the staff have a theory of assuming that we are able to successfully close on this or find no other problems, what would be the time frame in terms of acting on, clearing that property and making it available for parking for the next Little League season?
It would more than likely be next spring or early summer before we could get to that point in time. We would have to do some investigative work to determine the cost and possibly contract out the work for that to be done. We can make it ready and available for parking immediately as the season begins, and our intent would be to move forward because if nothing else, it would be much more aesthetically appealing if that building is gone. So we will report back to the council with a more definite time frame a little bit later on in the year.
But they'll be able to park in the existing free
That's correct.
space until we get the rest of the.
That's correct, and that's part of the terms of the contract. Good.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. All right, our second public hearing, and this will present some action perhaps on the first reading, is a request for the exemption to the subdivision ordinance, section 5.18, under private streets and reserved strips. Private streets and reserved strips of the town subdivision ordinance reads, unless otherwise provided herein or in the town zoning ordinance, there shall be no private streets platted in any subdivision. Every subdivided property shall be served from a publicly dedicated street instructed to standards of this code and accepted and maintained by the town of Abingdon. There shall be no reserve strips controlling access to streets. The property in question is tax map number 11, 4, and 5, and pursuant to the Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, 15.2-2204. Mr. Garrett Jackson, Assistant Town Manager, would you enlighten us on this, please, referring to not only the nature of the property, but the issue that we're dealing with?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, members of council, at the October 22nd regular Planning Commission meeting this year, they also held a public hearing in regards to this matter. The properties in question were created much further back than our current subdivision ordinance and have not been subdivided within the scope of this new ordinance since, I think, 2005. One of the caveats to this particular project, the Taylor's Hill Community Development Block Grant Project, was that a certain number of single-family, low to moderate income housing units were to be built. 10, I think, is the magic number. 3 of these lots were part of that project. 2 of the lots on Wiley Street are not accessible from Wiley Street in terms of driveways, ingress, egress, due to the extreme topographic conditions getting up into the property. It's very steep and it's also extremely rocky. People Incorporated had been working with the town in regards to this project in terms of purchasing. Mr. Rush, Dr. Rush, how many of the properties were purchased by you? 9 were purchased by People Incorporated, And these were some of those lots. They've already built several homes on those properties they own. And this particular situation requires ingress and egress from the street to the south, but up the hill from these properties. It would be a driveway, and it already exists, that goes across one property and then connects into the two properties on Wiley Street, which really in a civil, or in a legal matter, it really is a civil matter. It's between the property owners, not so much a private street being constructed. The Planning Commission reviewed the topographic conditions and then just the overall caveats of the Community Development Block Grant, and recommended that the exemption be approved, allowing this driveway to take place, or to be approved so that these homes could be constructed. One was just constructed by Habitat for Humanity in the past 4 weeks, and then the other is a project called an Eco House, Eco Mall, from the University of Virginia's Architecture School. That will be coming along here pretty soon. But both of those homes will be served by this driveway. And it is a driveway, not a private street.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That being said, we are going to have a public hearing regarding this matter. Mr. Jackson has presented a description of the properties that we are hearing and the action that the exception that we're being asked to make to the subdivision ordinance. That being said, I would ask if there is anyone, I will declare the public hearing to be open, and I will ask if there is anyone present this evening who wishes to address the council on this matter. If so, they may come forward at the present time. There does not appear to be anyone who wishes to address the council on this matter at the present time. I will therefore declare the public hearing to be closed. And I will ask council if they have any questions of Mr. Jackson or other members of our staff regarding this matter. We seem to be very amenable and have no
Mr. Mayor,
yes, sir.
This is probably for Mr. Jackson. Will this just take care of the two properties, the one current structure, or will there be others in the future as part of this 9?
It's just those two.
Just the two, okay. That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Just to mention the Habitat for Humanity dedication service was yesterday, well attended, very nice house.
Very good, and we certainly appreciate the assistance of Habitat for Humanity and People Incorporated in helping to provide housing over there. It's the Taylor's Hill project has been one that has really made a huge difference in that neighborhood and for people who've needed good housing, and it's been a pleasure to see the changes that have occurred, even though it's one of those places where our town attorney really got quite a bit of experience before it was over with, as did several of us, but it's very much of a success. Are there other questions? Hearing none, council, what is your desire regarding this matter?
I'll make a motion we allow the exemption in the subdivision ordinance.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to allow the exemption to the subdivision ordinance. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask our clerk to call the roll, please.
Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Humphries?
Aye.
Mr. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mayor Morgan?
Aye. Okay, we have two ordinances tonight for second reading. The first ordinance is a proposed rezoning Colonial Road Development, CMM Ventures LLC, and United Way of Russell, Washington Counties. Mr. Michael C. Neal, trustee and representative, Post Office Box 607, Abingdon, Virginia. It was an application to rezone properties located between Colonial Road and Hagee Street on the north side of such street, and known as lots number 23 and 24, consisting of .403 acres. Lot number 25 consisting of .225 acres, and lot 26 consisting of .25 acres of the Colonial Road development. And the request was to move it from R3 Residential District to B3 Central Business District This would be on tax map number 18, 1, 23, 24, 25, and 26. And I'll call on Mr. Jackson to come forward, please. And Mr. Jackson, I think we have a good understanding of this, but I know there was some little bit of controversy and discussion the last go-round, and can you address where we stand on the issues that might have been raised, or would Mr. Dew be appropriate to come forward and talk about that, or there may be the Copenhavers may even wish to.
I think Mr. Dew and the Copenhavers may want to address the road issues. I can briefly summarize the rezoning issue. It's currently zoned as limited industrial, which would allow an office, but the property owners are requesting to rezone it so that it would allow small offices on two of the currently zoned residential properties. That's mostly the Neal properties. This would allow the overflow workers from the United Way building currently at the corner of Preston and Colonial to flow into those two buildings for extra office space.
Okay. Very good. Does anyone have any further questions of Mr. Jackson at the moment?
I'd just like to get Mr. Jackson to point out what zoning classification we have determined best fits and what council voted on at the last meeting.
Their original request was for a B3 central business district, but staff looking at that and then recommending to the Planning Commission that an office and institutional district would be more appropriate. That way certain businesses wouldn't be opened up to come into a more residential area like the Colonial Road development. B3 would allow everything from laundromats to gas stations and so on, whereas office and institutional does keep it a more private, professional office appearance.
Okay, very good, sir.
Is there a...
And I believe that is consistent with what the council voted on at the first reading.
Yeah. And is there a special use exception, let's say, for some kind of in office and institutional? Is there a special use permit if if you deem you have some low impact business that wanted to locate?
There are two special use permit allowed uses in that district, and off the top of my head I can't tell you what they are, but they are specifically spelled out in the zoning ordinance though.
Okay.
I can look it up real quick.
All right. Mr. Dew, would you come forward for just a minute? I've got a question or two. Again, I see the Copenhavers are with us this evening, and I know you've tried to sort of meet and look over the situation, and we may want to call on Mr. Copenhaver in a minute too. Several concerns were raised, and I think you've met with the Copenhavers and are...
I spoke with Ms. Copenhaver last week, but based on the last council meeting, there was a request to look into the traffic situation specifically in that area, and we did conduct a traffic count during what are commonly considered the peak traffic hours during the day. We did a morning peak and then a noontime peak hour count, and I guess as expected, the traffic volumes were low, the traffic counts were low. Not surprising for this type of road. It's a very narrow right-of-way. It's only a 20-foot right-of-way, and the actual pavement itself varies through that section roughly about 12 to 14 feet wide. It basically functions as an alley, which provides access to the local properties for local traffic. Specifically, obviously there has been some issue over time as far as large vehicles entering in Hagee Street at Preston. There's a business down Hagee Street that does occasionally bring in large trucks, and they also have large truck-mounted cranes that they use Hagee Street to access their business location. So there has in the past been some incidences there of the trucks, I guess, tracking off the pavement, and maybe, I don't know exactly how many cases, but there's been some damage to a brick wall on the Copenhavers property line there as well. In the past 13 months, the town Town staff has done a few modifications down there at the intersection. One was related to stormwater control on the Copenhagen side of the alley, or Hagee Street, was to install an asphalt berm there to help redirect stormwater flow away from their property and direct it further down Hagee Street where there are some other stormwater facilities. There's also on the other side of the alley, on the side where the United Way currently is, we did install a small section of curb and gutter that not only helped with the stormwater, but also helped widen out the radius for vehicles turning into Hagee from Preston Street. Also visually helps kind of define that edge of the pavement, or that edge of Hagee Street. So given the narrow width of the right-of-way and the pavements, my opinion at this time, with the vehicle counts that we've had and what we were able to do to try to widen out the radius at Preston, I wouldn't recommend any additional changes this time, simply because to widen out the roadway in that area would require obtaining right-of-way and possibly even some demolition of some features, roadside features. I wouldn't, at this stage, until we get any further information on the building use or the property use, I don't have any hard numbers on how much those buildings might increase traffic on Hagee. My speculation is that it wouldn't increase traffic much, but I guess given all the information we have right now, I wouldn't recommend trying to do any further widening of the roadway at this time.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Duke?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, did you look at one-way traffic?
I considered it. My personal opinion, again, considering the existing conditions and what that roadway is used for, my feeling is that one-way traffic would actually decrease the function of the road and cause some inconvenience and potentially even some safety concerns elsewhere. I mean, that typically is what you look at if you're going to convert a two-way roadway to one-way, is especially if you have a problem that you're trying to address, does it simply shift the problem somewhere else? And I personally don't see a value to converting the roadway to one-way. I think it would just introduce an inconvenience for basically all the property owners in the area. And there is always some aspect of emergency vehicle response as well.
Anybody else have questions for Mr. Dew? Thank you. Mr. Copenhaver, this is not a public hearing, but do you have additional comments that you'd like to make about this matter?
Well, I mean, I just heard that you're not going to do anything again. Am I missing something there?
Possibly, yes.
So what do you intend to do? I mean, we've got property that, we get our wall knocked down. The road, like you said, is 12, 13 feet wide in places. We've been there, Mom's been there for 50 years. She's always paid her taxes. She's always kept her place looking clean. We come here in maybe 96, 2006 sometime. We opposed where the United Way is going to be now. Well, that's okay. Y'all will fix it. You'll make the entrance on Preston Street. And at the same time, Hills has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. The little road just doesn't handle the traffic. I mean, it doesn't matter if one truck comes down the road a day, if that truck is too big, then it's going to hit things. And now you put more traffic on the road. I mean, I don't know how many cars will be coming up and down it, but it makes logical sense if you look that the parking will be in the back of the buildings. So there'll be more traffic on the road. And like I said, I don't hear anything that y'all want to do other than grow revenue. Make more expensive land, but you don't want to do anything to improve that street. And I don't understand why the street can't be widened to 20 feet. I mean, why that there can't, if it's a 20-foot wide street, why there can't be 18 foot of asphalt down it that people can get up and down.
Mr. Dew, any comment about that?
I guess one comment would be if we did widen the street, it would, like I mentioned earlier, it would require additional right-of-way, which in all likelihood would include taking the wall that, is in question. I haven't heard at any time that that would be something that you would, that you would want to happen or be willing to give up.
But I mean, why do we have to give up and the United Way not have to give up?
So they would probably, if we widened it out, including the right-of-way, it would come from both sides. So I think what we've, what we tried.
We had it surveyed, and, we had it surveyed, and we marked our line off. And when we look at 20 foot over, it comes way up into where the plantings are in the United Way property. So I don't understand why you have to come toward us and you can't go that way.
Well, we would go that way, so a certain distance as well. What I'm saying is typically we would widen the road, take right away from both sides, and keep the center line alignment the way it is now. If there's also utility lines, utility poles along that other side of Hagee Street as well that would have to be dealt with. So what I think we've tried to do is improve the situation at the intersection. Like I mentioned earlier, as far as traffic volume, that roadway is not overtaxed. I do understand there are large vehicles going down Hagee, and they occasionally have caused, an issue like you've mentioned, but by and large, the vehicles that have traveled down that roadway and through that intersection have done so without incident. I understand there are incidences every time.
You say by and large, but the large part cost us $500 every time we pass it. I mean, you all wouldn't make like an exception so we could just take it off our taxes, would you?
Mr. Dew, let me ask a question. In terms of the proposed development and so forth, or this change that would allow the office space on the properties in question, we're talking about essentially passenger vehicles?
Well, I'm not sure, I can't speak for the
but that would be
given the
anticipated.
zoning.
Office staff.
Office staff,
Okay.
typically that would just be passenger vehicles.
When you did the traffic studies and so forth and looked at the peak times and so forth, can you remember how many cars we were talking about, or, typically?
They were all cars, except for, when we were doing the counts, we divided it up into anything less than 24 feet and anything more than 24 feet. During these times, there was only one vehicle. It was a truck larger than 24 feet. And I think it went into the business directly behind Copenhagen property. It wasn't that particular vehicle didn't go on down to the Hiltz garage business. That was just during the during the times
typically,
we
how many
kept.
cars were moving down that lane?
We had during the hour and a half period in the morning that we observed, there were a total of 14 vehicles over an hour and a half that used Hagee Street. During the noon hour and a half period that we observed, there was a total of 25 vehicles. So again, the traffic volume is easily handled by a facility like that, a small road. Basically, like if you make a comparison to maybe Plum Alley or Troopers Alley, some of those, they handle a great deal more traffic than that. There's certainly not a problem as far as the capacity of the roadway to handle that number of vehicles.
And the roadway now is how many feet wide?
The pavement itself varies from roughly about 12 to 14 feet wide. The right-of-way is 20 feet.
Council, do we have other questions of Mr. Dew or Mr. Jackson or Mr. Copenhagen?
Well, so just one comment is the width of the right-of-way. The right-of-way is 20 feet and the road's 14, so, was it built more narrow because it wasn't a requirement to have 20 feet of pavement, or what was you may not
I don't
have
think
the history.
so. Typically, I can't think of any roadways where the pavement is the full width of the right-of-way. The right-of-way has to accommodate other things, shoulders, ditching, utility poles, various number of things. So, I don't think there was any necessarily intention. There are, like I mentioned, utility poles. I know there's at least one pole on the north side or the United Way side of the of Hagee Street, not far from the intersection there, close to the edge of the asphalt.
I know we talked about this in the work session, and refresh my memory as to why you didn't recommend putting up again, I have to use comparisons, but like those poles in front of the post office, why you recommended not putting one in front of the wall there, just for instance, just to keep one of those big trucks from hitting the wall?
Probably for a couple reasons. Number one, a barrier like that or a solid area like that is not typically put in a roadway or within the right-of-way. We did put delineators, reflective delineators near the wall to try to increase the visibility of it. But if you put something like a bollard, like you're mentioning, or even if you put guardrail in a right-of-way, it's basically just another barrier or item to hit. That gets hit, gets damaged. It seems it's not a I guess a proper use of guardrail to do that.
Except it's really, and I'm not being argumentative, I just want to keep, it's also not a proper use of having large vehicles travel a road like that to go to a business. So even though we inherited this, that teeny tiny road for big trucks to go back through there, you could almost make an argument for restricting the use of that road to vehicles. So, it's a problem we all inherited, and, if the big issue is that those trucks are on a continuous basis invading, the property that basically goes to the line, sometimes I just wonder if there's not some special.
I think that's an appropriate question, and I'm wondering, we have a business and it's established and it's legal, but it does have some massive, equipment that comes in and out of there. And I'm trying to remember in my own mind the other access points in and out, but, is there other reasonable access into that property off of Colonial or around through there?
Not really.
There are other roadways, but they are similar in width and utility poles nearby. It's similar. Similar situations from any access points. I guess just given the nature of truck drivers, I know they're going to attempt to make especially for established business, I'm sure they're going to try to access it from the best vantage point or the best access point.
I might point out that there's a much wider street, Stone Mill Road, which you may recall had a power pole knocked down in the past 2 or 3 months, I guess, maybe 4 months, and it's even a much wider road than either of these that are going into this property. So because of the placement of the power poles, it would seem to me that it would require some significant relocation of those poles to be able to properly widen the street. One thing that has crossed my mind, and John and I have talked a little bit about this, is that at such time as United Way would develop these two properties, we could examine the entrances at that point in time and perhaps offer ways in which they could be designed in a way that would be much more safer for traffic coming in and off into that location. Now, relative to the big trucks, I don't know, outside of moving power poles and making a much larger street, that there's a whole lot that we can do at that location.
I don't know where we got disconnected, but I wasn't really talking about poles. I was talking about a barrier at that turn that protected their private property. I wasn't, I wasn't talking about other exits or
I was
entrances.
talking about the poles when the issue arose as to going out another way.
Oh, okay.
There are power poles, and I believe Ms. Copenhagen acknowledged that just a second ago, but there are power poles down there that
Right.
would make it very difficult. And that's why I used the example of the much larger street just down the road, that the power pole was knocked down and power was out for half a day as a result of power pole being knocked down.
Well, let me ask one more question here then. All right, we're being asked, to approve the rezoning of the property, but I gather what we can rezone this, but in terms of our town has control over entrances on that property, and are you indicating that, for example, it may very well be possible to, as part of the process from an administrative standpoint, to really sort of perhaps create some restrictions or whatever regarding the entrances onto that property?
Well, yeah, anytime, like if they're going to or propose or want an entrance off of Hagee Street, they would have to come to us and get approval of the entrance, yes.
United Way does, but Hills Garage doesn't.
Right, but in other words, the United Way property, which has been the property in question, you would have the ability to control whether or not they had an entrance off of Hagee Street. Is that correct? And they don't have an entrance off of Hagee Street at the moment?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
It seems like there's actually two questions in play here.
Yeah.
One of them is the actual entrance and egress that's going to come from Hagee Street or Colonial Road or Preston Street or wherever it might come from. And the other is an ongoing problem that Eddie and Mrs. Copenhaver have, that they're getting their wall knocked down. Now, and I agree with Mr. Dew. If we put what do you call it? A bollard or some type of standard there to where the wall wouldn't be hit, but our bollard would be hit, at least we're saving their wall. And I know it's not the best of things, but I think that their complaint is not the traffic, but the impact that the larger trucks are having and what they're doing to their property. As far as this, I don't think that this probably is going to affect their property very much. But as far as the big trucks now, I think that there's an issue beyond, what we're talking about as far as just this rezoning about their wall getting beat up. And it's a very valid. If I had to put my wall up every year, every couple of years, I would be aggravated with that too.
Yeah, I think you've touched on it, that is correct, and there's, clearly from what I'm hearing stated tonight, that we have the ability as a town to really restrict the traffic or the entrance and egress of this specific property from Hagee Street, but aside from that, there's still the issue of their wall and damage to their property and so forth from that area, which I think merits some more serious attention on our part if we can find it here.
Coming out, I was sitting here kind of jotting down places from the garage that big trucks can come out of. You're looking at Bradley Street, Butt Street, Stone Mill Road, and William Street, and that's about the only streets that big trucks can come out. And all of them means the truck's going to have to cross over into oncoming traffic, every one of them. There's not a one unless they're, every one of them would.
Yeah.
And so it's going to really create a safety hazard. But, restricting them, I can't see would be an option, restricting them on going down Hagee Street. But I could see trying to put something there to protect their wall. Certainly I would say that Eddie would have certainly, if it would have been within his power, he would have put something there that legally he could have put there if he was able to. But legally he can't come on that right away and put
Well, the wall is off of right of way. It's on the private property, so they can put bollards on the end of the wall on their property. The question about what to put along the face of the wall within the right of way. The wall is, I don't know how long the wall is, few hundred feet, I'm guessing, or?
No, it's maybe 8
Huh.
feet.
But where do you
What
think
you're
protection
talking
would?
about here, I understand your issue, I understand your hesitancy, because you're talking about doing something to protect one property owner's private property. But the, you know, the issue is that as the town has grown and progressed, we have businesses that aren't really conducive to the neighborhood. And so those businesses are businesses that belong to the town of Abingdon. They pay, you know, they pay their taxes and they pay their business license fees and you know, and all of that. And this is one of those special cases where, you know, the business is so very not conducive to the road that I just think it's our responsibility from a safety standpoint to you know, try to do something that won't restrict the business, but that will protect the property owner, you know, simply because of the years that have passed since, you know, all the things have happened that have happened. You know, we're not writing those kind of business permits anymore. That's why Garrett didn't ask for general business.
That's why we have zoning,
Right.
you know, among other
But
things.
this is a special situation as far as that business is concerned. We don't want to tell the, you know, the Hilts that we don't want their business there. We're glad to have them. But we do have a property owner that's generally, regularly impacted because of it. And, you know.
And we're glad to have them.
And we're glad to have them. And so, you know, I just think this is a special circumstance, and whether it be a guardrail or whatever, truck drivers are much more careful if they think they're going to tear up one of those $2,000 tires or dent a bumper that's going to cost whatever it costs. And so, you know, I just think that this is a special circumstances on.
Well, I would ask, you know, again, I think Mr. Humphreys, Councilman Humphreys touched on the thing, and we've defined that, you know, really that there are two issues, one of which we can, I think, deal with effectively when we talk about the rezoning to really manage that to where it won't be an additional thing. As noted earlier, this is a problem. It's been a problem, you know, for a type of business that's you know, legal and perhaps not, you know, conducive to the neighborhood where it, there are going to be issues with the neighborhood where it is now. I have a feeling that there may very well be some issues concerning putting up the bollard and so forth even that probably ought to be examined from a legal perspective too. But I would ask our town staff, if you would please, to consider this matter, you know, re-explore some of the options, and I would ask if we could have this on the December agenda to examine that issue a little bit further, because I do think, you know, that the Copenhavers have raised valid issues, that if we can find a reasonable way to help, you know, preserve their property and deal with this, that we sure ought to try it. But I think we're going to have to look a little bit and come up with some specific suggestions, and I would propose that we deal with that in December if that would be the consensus and agreement of council. Are there other issues or other things that we want to say about that issue right now, or are you prepared to perhaps consider what you might want to do on the issue of the proposed rezoning?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure there's anything else I want to say on this issue right here, but I think that you hit the nail around the head when you said reasonable. And
Yeah.
I think what we're looking for is reasonable accommodation for them.
Yeah.
Because they have had to put up with the business, maybe that's not conducive to the area, as well as other people, just not the Copenhavers. And so some reasonable accommodation, I would think, if we can find some for them, would be very suitable.
Very good. Okay, so we will have further discussion of that issue on our at our December meeting. And council, the issue, unless there is further discussion about it, we have an issue before us concerning a proposed rezoning of the property that was going to be used by the United Way, and I would ask what your pleasure is on that matter.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept the staff recommendation on the second reading to approve the rezoning to office and institutional.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve on the second reading the rezoning of the property previously described from residential to office and institutional. Now, is there further discussion on the matter? Hearing none, I'll ask our clerk to call the roll, please.
Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Humphries?
Aye.
Mr. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mayor Morgan?
Aye. And I would say to the Copenhabers, you really do have our attention. And I don't expect that anything we did tonight would satisfy you, but we are serious about trying to find some reasonable solution to the problems that you've raised, and we will be talking about this again in December. And our staff will be working to see if we can find a way to help resolve these issues that you've been having.
If y'all would like to come by, I could be there anytime to like kind of show you around and show you what's going on.
Very good, sir. I would like to come down there maybe one Saturday between now and our next meeting to perhaps meet with y'all and have a look.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, and thank you. I'd like to thank the Copenhabers for being here with us and helping us to understand the issues and the problems we've had. And I want to thank our staff for your work on this. I think ultimately we've we've made some progress on a couple of things here tonight, and I do appreciate that. Okay, we have also an ordinance on the second reading tonight, an ordinance by the Council of the Town of Abingdon, Virginia, to repeal, amend, and reenact Part 2, Code of the Chapter 66, Taxation, Article 2, Real Property Tax, Division 5, Historic District Tax Abatement, Sections 6671 through 6678, to amend Sections 6671 and 6675, and add Sections 6676 through 6678 to the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Abingdon, Virginia, providing incentive to the homeowners in the Historic District to complete essential maintenance, restoration, preservation, and rehabilitation projects through extending a 10-year comprehensive tax credit for eligible rehabilitation projects completed and an exemption from tax assessment increases for a period of 10 years. And Mr. Jackson, where are you? Because I won't read that again.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, last month you heard this for the first time, and it's going to be difficult for me to repeat it as well. It's a tax incentive program. Unlike most in the Commonwealth, and very rare throughout the country, but it is allowed through the National Preservation Act. This tax incentive is not a tax abatement, it's a tax credit program. It's to promote the upkeep and stewardship of historic properties in the town, specifically in the Old and Historic District. It's difficult for the Board of Architectural Review to carry out their mission and require structures to be preserved in the manner that they're supposed to be preserved, asking property owners to step up to financial levels that are sometimes extremely steep without some sort of incentive to help them do that. This incentive works in a way that's that several other credit programs work throughout the Commonwealth, but this one will probably be the most aggressive if it's adopted. If someone is working on a project costing $5,000, the program allows for a 6-month abatement for every $2,500 of work that's done. That would be in materials and labor. Anyone applying for this program would have to bring all of that documentation to the town hall and meet with myself and Sean Taylor. Mr. Kelly would then, after the Board of Architectural Review has approved their plans, Mr. Kelly would be the one to sign off on the approval of the tax credit, which would then be forwarded to the treasurer's office, town treasurer's office, for a credit on the structure itself, not the property, but only the structure, the assessed value of that structure. So this 6-month credit is available for anyone spending up to $2,500. So if you spend $5,000, you get a year credit for your taxes, and depending on what that amount is, it could roll several years into that 10-year period that you would not have to pay those 6-month tax payments.
Okay. Any questions regarding this matter, council? All right, I think we understand what we're doing, and it is a very progressive and a desirable thing, I think, to help preserve that neighborhood, which is an important economic asset to the town as a whole. Is there any further discussion or anything? I'll entertain a motion regarding this matter.
Mr. Mayor, I move on the second reading, we repeal, amend, and reenact Part 2, Code Chapter 66 to establish the tax credit program for the town of Abingdon.
Okay, is there a second to this?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance that has been presented to us on the second reading. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Rosenbaum, please.
Mr. Howard?
As I did on the first reading, I'm going to abstain from this due to I have property in this district.
Mr. Humphreys? Same
Yes,
thing?
I respectfully, yes, I abstain because I own properties, and my wife and I own properties in this area also.
All right. Mr. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mayor Morgan?
Aye. Okay, thank you very much.
It's a good thing we don't all live in historic.
Yeah, you know.
We can remedy that.
Very easily.
It makes me wonder how I missed the boat, but anyway, we have, under reports from the town manager, we have consideration and approval of the revisions to the guidelines for design review as recommended by the Board of Architectural Review. Mr. Garrett Jackson, again, we are focused a little bit on that neighborhood tonight.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this is a recommendation from the Board of Architectural Review, an 18-month process of reviewing and revising these guidelines. The guidelines were first recommended in 1998 by the Town Preservation Plan and rewritten with some pretty good teeth on the gum, so to speak, in 2003, and that took about 24 months. They were unveiled in February of 2005. And we've been working with those ever since, but those had several loopholes in them that were both unfair to business and residential owners of property in the historic district. This latest revision was taken on by the BAR starting in January of last year, and includes tons of different languages used in terms of architecture and whatnot. Like I said, we needed to put teeth in the gums. Two of the most important aspects that seem like they should actually be typical procedural things were that the board is now requiring that any project that comes before them has to have drawings with them. We tend to get a lot of hand-drawn notes, so I keep a lot of those for cloudy days. They're kind of fun to look at. The other thing is that the Preservation Review Board, excuse me, the BAR, in addition to the historic preservation briefs that the Secretary of the Interior for the United States puts out and the National Park Service, they'll be using those briefs as well as the Virginia Design Review Guidelines and the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, which we were already using in these guidelines, but we added 2 more documents to those, to this set of guidelines. This set is on landscape style paper is 22 pages. That includes about 4 pages of definitions, and the rest is just the design guidelines themselves. This is not an ordinance, but this is a document that our Article 8 of the zoning ordinance reflects and cross-references for the Board of Architectural Review's decisions. They can't make decisions simply on mere personal taste or satisfaction. It has each project has to meet the guidelines, and they have to reference the guidelines in their decision making. In the future, near future, and we're currently working on the preservation plan revisions, and Article 8 of the zoning ordinance does need to be amended as well. And one of those changes that I'll just briefly mention is that the BAR will be asking the council to rename that board to the Historic Preservation Review Board to better reflect its efforts in not just architecture, but archaeology and other preservation efforts.
Very good, sir. And again, I think you may have touched on this earlier, but when was the last time there have been any revision in these guidelines?
They were completed and adopted in December of '04 and then unveiled in a ceremony with the mayor of Charleston, South Carolina, Joe Riley, here in February of '05.
Okay, very good. Council, do you have questions, Mr. Jackson, regarding this matter?
I'm not sure about any questions. I would just like to bring up the fact that I was on that committee in 2003. We diligently worked for almost every week and sometimes every other week for almost a year and a half, 2 years, to come up with those. We were trying to find some, put some teeth in them and put some fines and put some things that would help people adhere to them. The one thing I didn't know, and I guess and Garrett Mr. Jackson just brought it up, was having to have a drawing. So you're talking about an architectural drawing?
Right, and it doesn't have to be by an architect. It can be by a certified contractor. Just something that helps the board visualize what's being done to the property. We had several that come in the form of narrative, and whereas staff might be able to visualize what's being done, it's difficult for board members to read that packet and visualize exactly what work's being taken care of. So.
Right, and the reason is I know some of the properties tend to be that can be run down.
Mm-hmm.
People just don't have the affordability to be able
Right.
to, other than bringing their Etch-a-Sketch in
Right.
and doing something.
And then this document is really the reason the tax credit program is beneficial, is because of the requirements that people in the historic district have as opposed to folks elsewhere in town. The tax credit program is really a benefit to these guidelines.
And we'll extend it into the architect's fee.
What's that?
So that means that on the tax credit, I said when we were just passed, it'll include the architect's fee. Like if you have a drawing, if you are requiring a drawing, then that would qualify in the tax.
Right. Yes, it would be. Yes, it would be part of that $2,500. Yes, I see what you're saying now.
Right.
Okay. Others? Comments? Mr. Berry, I think you've
Mr. Mayor,
labored at the...
As a member of the Board of Architectural Review, I'd like to move that we approve the new guidelines as presented.
Okay.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to approve the new guidelines as presented. Are there going to be just three of us that will vote on this go around? Okay. All right, that's fine. I wasn't sure if it would... all right, very good, sir. We have a motion and a second to approve the guidelines as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Rosenbaum, please.
Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Humphries?
Aye.
Mr. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mayor Morgan?
Aye. Okay. All right, very good. Okay, that brings us to item J2, consideration and approval of restructuring of the Fields Pens Committee. Again, Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Mayor, I will say that Mr. Humphries and Mr. Howard could vote on that because that is not going to be a financial benefit to them to vote on this guidelines.
And it could be an expense to them, actually.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes.
The Fields Pen Committee was created a few years ago to oversee the property at the Fields Pen 1860 house, and is currently, just until about 2 weeks ago, was under the supervision of the Tourism Department. And as the council's aware, the historic properties have been shifted over into the Planning Department, the Historic Preservation section of that. One of the first things that Mr. Taylor and I looked at was the structure of the committee, and we wanted to uniformly structure the committees for those historic properties. And with that, we looked at the number of committee members for the Fields Pen property. There are 9 voting members, 4 of which are paid staff, either full or part-time. To my knowledge, that's the only committee other than the Sustain Abingdon Committee that allows voting members to be staff. And then one of those staff persons was the chairman of the committee. We asked that it be restructured to a 5-member board, including Ms. Henrietta Umbarger, Ms. Lois Humphreys, and Ms. Joella Barber, Ms. Betsy White, and Mr. Rick Humphreys, all of which are currently on that board, and that the staff members be removed from voting rights. And then Mr. Taylor serve as technical staff, and then Donna Marie Emmerich, who serves as sort of the chief docent there, she could serve as the secretary in a similar fashion to what Leanne Hunter serves as the secretary to the Muster Grounds Committee. This would take, of course, paid staff off of the voting rights list. They could still attend the meetings if they wanted, but it makes the committee more of a citizen-based committee.
All right. Council, do you have any questions of Mr. Jackson regarding this matter? Okay. Again, we have a recommendation that we, excuse me, sir, I'm sorry.
Well, do we have the Division of Historic Preservation in effect already?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we have that. That's in the write-up.
Mr. Taylor and I met with Kevin Costello and Aaron Widener a couple weeks ago and sort of got the rundown of how Fields Pen is being run and the budget breakdown. We went ahead and had tourism schedule out the workers for Fields Pen through December 30th, and then January 1 of next year, our staff will start doing the scheduling for personnel down there. But we're already in the works with working on the budget issues there, and it'll still show up under our town budget as tourism, but it's being handled through the planning department.
Again, Council, we have a recommendation before us this evening concerning the proposed restructuring of the Fields Pen Committee. What's your pleasure on this matter?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the recommendation of staff that Mr. Jackson just presented to us with the modification of this committee.
Okay. Is there a second to this proposal?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the proposed restructuring of the Fields Pen Committee. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Rosenbaum, please.
Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Humphries?
Aye.
Mr. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mayor Morgan?
Aye. We have a resolution for our consideration this evening, which is a resolution of the Council of the Town of Abingdon for VDOT revenue sharing, an application for VDOT revenue sharing funds related to a preliminary engineering study for a phase of the Frenchmore Boulevard extension. Again, I didn't quite word that correctly, but basically it would be to request funds from VDOT under the revenue sharing program for the preliminary engineering phase of a perhaps extension of Frenchmore Boulevard. And Mr. Dew, good to see you again.
Good to see you. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you. I'm hoping that some of the rest of the folks here might as well.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this is, most of you are aware of the project. For those in the audience, I'll just briefly explain. Under consideration is the extension of Frenchmore Boulevard from its current terminus at the cul-de-sac beyond the business incubator and in the Stone Mill Business and Tech Park to extend it over to Stone Mill Road and then beyond over to Cook Street to basically essentially tie it into Cumming Street at that point. It is on our capital improvements plan. This phase right here would be the preliminary engineering or the engineering phase of the project. This resolution is documenting the town's commitment to participating in VDOT's revenue sharing program, which is a 50-50 split of the cost. The total estimated cost for this phase of the project is currently $1,104,000. So this resolution is calling for the VDOT's and the town's participation to each be $552,000. If this is approved, if this application is approved by VDOT, those funds would be available in July of 2013. And we would be required to start utilizing those funds within a year from that date.
Okay, and what would be our town's financial obligation under this?
$552,000 would be the town's 50% split.
In other
of
words,
that.
again, it's a 50/50 match on this.
Correct.
Okay. But it has not yet been approved, so our obligation, should this come through, would be budgeted for the next year's budget as appropriate.
Correct. This resolution is required in the application process for the revenue sharing.
All right.
I will point out to the council that the deadline for this application was last week, so we had to get that in, I believe, on the actual last day of the application. Would also mention that it's certainly something that is not without the realm of possibility of getting other governmental entities to participate in this project as well, which we would hope to do. But if we don't draw any money from this, as Mr. Dew has indicated, within the year, if we are granted the application, we would have no obligation. Or if we chose to withdraw, we could withdraw at any time.
That's correct. They can deallocate the funds if requested.
Do we have an estimated time frame of when VDOT would make a decision about our application?
Typically, they're going to decide by the end of this calendar year or early part of 2013.
Okay. Very good. Does anybody have any further questions of either Mr. Dew or Mr. Kelly about this matter? Is there, council, what's your pleasure on this matter?
I'll go ahead and make a recommendation that we approve this
Okay. We have a motion that we approve this resolution as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, again, a motion and a second to approve the resolution as presented to seek assistance from VDOT for the engineering phase of this proposed study. I'll ask our clerk to call the roll, please.
Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Humphries?
Aye.
Mr. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mayor Morgan?
Aye. Okay, we have no unfinished business noted this evening, but we do have, I know, at least one matter not on the agenda that Mr. Humphries went to some considerable effort to make sure we could do tonight, and I think there's a very patient gentleman out here in the audience. And Mr. Humphries, I'll call on you to sort of lead us through this, please.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. We have Mac Johnson, who is representing the Over Mountain Victory Trail Association. And Mac has a presentation. Over the last couple of years, the Muster Grounds has contemplated having an outreach program for schools and entities that do not, that cannot come for whatever reason to the Muster Grounds to have an on-site experience. And so, part of this would be having a trailer in which equipment could be stored and protected, so that it could be, that could either be used down on site as a storage unit, or it can be used, like I say, to have the Over Mountain Victory Trail Roadshow. That would be a good word for it. Anyway, Mr. Johnson, I think, is here. I won't steal your thunder to maybe remedy that lack of equipment. It's on you, Mac.
Come forward.
Come forward.
Yes, sir.
I didn't prepare a speech.
That's all right.
You just give them the title.
Well, like Mr. Humphrey said, we acquired this trailer to use at the mustering ground. This is a nice trailer. It's got adequate room in it to store a lot of things. So we, after purchasing the trailer, we redid the inside somewhat so it'd be more usable. And at the present time, it's been delivered to the mustering ground. So it's basically, you said everything else.
All right.
And what it would be, I guess, is as Mr. Johnson has made the offer, it would be up to us to accept this from the Over Mountain Victory Trail Association. I would note that it's approximately $4,000 with the trailer and all installation of the shelving and stuff inside. So it's a $4,000 contribution, not asking for any money, just wanting to give something. So
Very good, sir. Well, it's a very kind gesture on the part of the Over Mountain Victory Trail Association, and I was just thinking this evening, really over the last decade or so, is the association has been around for a while, but with the work we've done at the mustering grounds, really the number of people who have heard about the Over Mountain Victory Men and their march and that aspect of the Revolutionary War really has made a big difference. The number of people who know about it and hear about it and can take some pride in what their ancestors did, and we sincerely appreciate the efforts of of your group and what you have done. Mr. Humphreys, would you be prepared to offer a motion regarding the acceptance of this?
I would, but I would like to tell you, I'd like to give you a little brief history of one thing.
All right.
And Kathy kind of reminded me of it just a second ago, because we see this person here a lot, but we don't see her brother. This is Joella Barber's brother, Mac Johnson. So anyway, yes. Right. And in spite of that, I will make the motion that we would gracefully accept the donation of the trailer from the Over Mountain Victory Trail Association.
Second.
We have a motion and a second that we gracefully accept the donation of the Over Mountain Victory Trail Association. And certainly we recognize also in the process the pride and contributions that your family has made to this effort. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Rosenbaum, please.
Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Humphries?
Aye.
Mr. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mayor Morgan?
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mac.
We do appreciate it.
I'm glad I know you're glad to have it out of your barn.
And thank you for sitting here till 9 o'clock.
I'd like to remind the mayor this would have been 10 o'clock on Friday night.
You got it. Yeah, all I can say is you're lucky it didn't 10, but we all are, so too.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else here this evening who wishes to bring matters before the council's consideration at the present time? Okay, not seeing anybody at the moment. Council, are there matters that you wish to report on to our committee tonight? Mr. Humphreys?
No, sir.
Mrs. Lowe?
I have a question that I didn't see downstairs, but I did see it just a few minutes ago, and it has to do with the 1.5% bonuses, and it looks like there's it looks like $150,000 is not going to be enough to cover it. Is that correct?
That's not correct, is it, Mark? We're a little bit less than 150, if I recall.
Okay.
I just was reviewing that. I believe we're still $30-some $100 below the 150 mark once we make that. In addition to that, there are the Christmas bonuses, which are covered in a separate line item.
Oh, okay. So the 86 is 1.5, but there was only 63 left. That's the reason I said that.
Right. So it's all balancing out.
Okay. And I guess I just want to question or ask that we are going to start a running list of the unfinished business for starting next council agenda, which I just wanted to let the public know. And the senior center, Bob Howard has graciously agreed to go with me tomorrow. We have gotten them to have a meeting with the United Way, and the Department of Social Services, who is a United Way board member, is actually going to come to that meeting also. So we'll have the Senior Services, the United Way, District 3, and Department of Social Services together, and hopefully we can do something about all of that. The the Cultural Heritage Foundation, I guess that's who it is. I don't know if it's Cultural Heritage Foundation or the Friends of Southwest Virginia, but one of the two called me to tell me I'd been appointed to their marketing committee.
All right.
Yeah. And so if you all have any questions about that, I'll try to take them to the right place.
What's the correct name?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure which group, they're spin-offs of the group, so I don't know which group that
I think the
falls in.
commission was established by the General Assembly, and the Friends of Southwest Virginia, whatever that name is the nonprofit that can receive donations from the general public
Okay.
as a 501c3. I think that's the difference between the two.
Okay. And we went to the chamber breakfast last month, which is always the third Thursday of every month. And Joe Johnson was very humble when we recognized his award, and he was really excited by that. So I just wanted you to know that.
You're referring to the Arthur Campbell Award.
Yes, I announced at the chamber meeting that Joe had been a recipient, and he was in the audience. And so he was very thankful that we had done that.
Okay. Anything else?
Not today.
No, we would point out that some of us didn't get the memo about wearing our Arthur Campbell tartaned scarves and ties tonight, but the rest of us will remember it next trip. Mr. Howard, do you have anything you care to bring to our... Alrighty.
Mr. Mayor, just one thing. I'd like to thank Mr. Kelly for sending the letter to VDOT and to our local legislators. Ms. Lowe and I had a chance to talk to Senator Carrico, Delegate Johnson, and Delegate O'Quinn about a week ago at an announcement, and they're going to try to look at Exit 17 in the sense of smoothing out the pavement is how I'm going to phrase that, but there are no guarantees to do anything other, but they are going to look at it, and they said Mr. Kelly's letter was a big help, so
very good.
Hopefully we'll have some. There's about probably 3 or 4 weeks before the asphalt plant's closed, so hopefully they'll get it done.
Anything else? And I'll do us a favor and not add anything to the festivities this evening.
Wait just a second. Mr. Mayor?
Excuse me?
I believe there is, unless it happened and I missed it, but the appointment to the Housing Authority.
Well, I actually did catch myself before you folks were kind enough to remind me. But we do have an appointment to the Abingdon Redevelopment and Housing Authority. Dr. Mike Rush, who was with us a little bit earlier, his term has been completed, but he is eligible under council guidelines to serve a second term. Council, is there a need to go into closed session on this, or can we handle this right now?
We can handle it right now. I move that we reappoint Mike Rush to serve a second term on the Abingdon Redevelopment and Housing Authority.
And I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Rosenbaum, please.
Mr. Howard?
Aye.
Mr. Humphries?
Aye.
Mr. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Lowe?
Aye.
Mayor Morgan?
Aye. Okay, and it is customary to make announcements. There's one that I don't see on here under item P, which is announcements, and that is that Election Day is tomorrow. I think it is customary for the mayor to say that everyone should vote early and often, and beyond that, we will leave it alone. I would point out that on November 10th, we have a train excursion from Roanoke and then to coming to Abingdon, and then going from Abingdon to Bristol. Those tickets are available, and there is a phone number that you can call if you were interested in riding. On November the 11th, which I believe is a Sunday, there will be a Veterans Day ceremony at Veterans Park beginning at 2 o'clock p.m. Veterans Day will be celebrated publicly, so to speak, on November the 12th when town offices will be closed in honor of Veterans Day. On November the 16th through the 18th, the Coombs Center will be having its annual crafts show. The 17th, Zazzy's Coffee House is featuring the Best Beard and Mustache competition, and that will be at 2 p.m. that day. On the 22nd and 23rd, town offices will be closed in recognition of the Thanksgiving holidays. December 1st is the Christmas parade on Main Street, and that will be at 11 o'clock a.m. Our December 3rd council meeting is on that day, the first Monday in December. And I think we had an announcement this evening that the Christmas tree lighting sponsored by our Parks and Recreation program will be on Thursday, December the 6th at 6:30 p.m. at the Abingdon Market Pavilion. And I would
Mr. Mayor?
encourage everybody to turn out. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, one other thing, because we don't hear from this person very often, and the train excursion that brings people into town was actually a wonderful success last year.
It was.
Tons of people in Abingdon. I was wanting to see if we get Mr. Costello up here just to give us a brief overview of how many people came to town and what kind of, because I know that they have put a huge preparation in to coming to the train coming to Abingdon on the 10th.
If you would do that, sir, we would be appreciated. All righty.
Well, last year, they had sold 600 tickets to go on the full excursion from Roanoke to Bristol, and we had about 400 people that got off that stayed in town, and we sold, I think, 200 tickets from here to Bristol and back. This year, I don't know what the causes are, but maybe a down economy and waiting for tomorrow to end so we can all breathe again, but they've sold about 300 as of today, 320-ish tickets to go from Roanoke to Bristol, and we're expecting, they sold 60 box lunches, which gives us an indicator that those are the people that are going to go all the way down to Bristol. So roughly 200 plus getting off at this point, and we've sold about 110 tickets from here to Bristol this year. So a little bit off from last year's numbers, but it's not uncommon with what their numbers indicated for another trip that they're doing up into the Shenandoah Valley. So.
And the trolleys and all the things you have going on, I mean, you put quite a bit of effort into this.
Yep, we're excited that they're going to come. It's an off month for us, so and a bunch of people coming into town for just a 2-hour stint eating lunch. We've set them up with information on restaurants and what to do. So yeah, we're going to send them out into town and spend dollars. Yeah.
Very good, sir.
Sure.
And will they have a steam locomotive this year? Do we know?
I don't think so, no. Most of the cars are actually owned by some of the people in the society, so they bring their own cars along with them, and then there's a series of old Amtrak passenger cars.
And I recently took the Amtrak out of Lynchburg to Philadelphia, and it was a wonderful trip that I had on that train, and we hope that maybe one of these days, not that far off, we'll see that train coming down this way.
Yeah, that would be great. One of the problems, though, is there's only one rail, and usually they have to have two so they can pass one another.
Well, they'll work on that.
I know, small details.
Is Mr. Dew here, and can he solve that problem?
Right.
Yeah, that bollard will fix it. Okay, unless anyone else has anything to cover this evening, I will declare us adjourned. Thank you for being here.